Wonderful. I just saw a question whether this webinar is going to be recorded. Yes, it is being recorded, and you will see the recording on the Child Hub website published today or maybe tomorrow at latest. Okay, wonderful. Great. I welcome you to this webinar, The Journey from Compassion Fatigue to Compassion Satisfaction, Addressing Burnout with an Emphasis on Self-Care. And this has been a highly demanded topic, and many of you have requested this, and we realized we have to repeat it. We had a webinar on a similar topic a year and a half, couple of years ago, and that was very popular, and we are very happy to do it again, especially because today we have a wonderful speaker, Sarah K. Smollens from Philadelphia. You can already see her on the video. I will give the floor to her in just a couple of minutes. Before we start, I would like to give you a very quick overview of this platform, and we will ask you a few questions, and then we will proceed. So I guess many of you have tried these webinar platforms before, and you know what to do. You don't have microphones, so whenever you have a question or a comment, please use the chat box below. You can see it just below me right now. So please write all your questions there and comments. In case you have any technical problem, we will help you, me or my colleague Katarina, whom you cannot see but who is also with us. And also, if you have any questions or comments to Sarah K, we will be collecting your questions and we will make sure all of them are answered at the end of her presentation. So please feel free to use the chat for these purposes. Also on the left, you see web links where you can find links to books and articles published by our presenter today, by Sarah K. She has published an article who received an award for the best article in 2013, What I Wish I Had Known, Burnout and Self-Care in Our Social Work. Please have a look, it's an amazing article. And she's also an author of best-selling books, and she has also published a book on burnout and self-care and social work. You find all the links on your left. Please follow them and check out. As I said, the recording will be available on childhub.org, and it's the website to check our future webinars. And in case you want a certificate to confirm your attendance of this webinar, please email us after the webinar at info@childhub.org. And now I would like Katarina to open a few polls. We will ask you to answer just a few questions to help us organize the webinars better in the future. So if you could take a few minutes. So we would like to know if it was easy for you to join the webinar, and whether you have attended our webinars before. Okay, I can see the guidance was clear. And also we would like to know how you learned about the webinar. Okay, 2 people had some problems joining the webinar. Okay, then most of the people attended our webinars before, but for half, it's the first one. Okay, interesting, welcome. I hope you enjoyed. And okay, good. So let's just take 1 more minute. And I have seen we have about 50 people here today with us. It's quite a good group. Thank you very much for joining. Okay. Wonderful. Okay, and while you continue answering the questions, I would like to say a couple of words about Sarah K. So she is based in Philadelphia, and she has a private and pro bono clinical work practice there. And she's a certified group psychotherapist and family life educator. And as I have said before, she has published in journals and newspapers and blogs, and you have the links to follow. And I think she's a very inspirational speaker. I enjoyed very much our preliminary work when we were preparing for this webinar. And I really hope that you will enjoy it too, and you will be inspired after the webinar, and it will have a positive impact on your work and private life. And now I would like to give the floor to Sarah Kay. Okay, you can begin. Okay, Sarah Kay, sorry, you have to unmute yourself. We cannot hear you yet. Can you please click on your microphone to unmute? No.
There. Okay, good. Well, it is an absolute privilege and pleasure to be with you all today. I am just so humbled that you reached out to me uh, from so many countries. And I just wish I could speak to you in your language to tell you how happy I am to be with you and how very much I hope that what I have to say will be meaningful and helpful to you. You know, when I was 3 years old, my mother became ill, and I lived with my grandmother from 3 to 6.5. And my grandmother always said that one heart knows another. So even though I don't know all of your languages, I hope you can hear my heart this afternoon. I know many of you are very, very tired after a strenuous morning and afternoon, and I hope that I can be invigorating and meaningful, as said. You know, a few years ago, when clients came to consult me about their difficulties, I used to be able to tell them that let's look at the rationale behind what you're experiencing. And I used to be able to help clients to know that many of their anxieties and fears are irrational. And that's not true today. So much of what we live with and fear is real. It's not due to something that we are reliving or acting out from the past. One of the main wonderful connections I feel with you each is we love children and we know the world really is a very small place. We are all connected, and all of our futures depend on helping children to know their promise and their opportunities. And I will tell you that when I was very young and in this field, I got very burned out, though I didn't know what the term burnout really meant then. And I had to leave for several years. And I'll tell you a little more about that later. I had to leave in order to fix what inside of me was being touched by the pain and sorrow of the children whom I worked with. Um, what was being touched was inside of me, really. It had very little to do with the work itself. And we're going to go into that as we discuss burnout more and what burnout really is. A little bit about the background of burnout. I want to discuss with you from a macro, a societal perspective, but also an interpersonal perspective. From a macro level, burnout was predicted by the world's first futurist, whose name was Alvin Toffler. And he wrote a book in 1970 called Future Shock. And in this book, Toffler predicted that our world was going to become so technologically complicated and so fast paced that we were going to just not be able to catch our breath as we tried to keep up with everything and the constant change. And Toffler said, we better get ready for this. That was 1970. Well, you know, how could we have known the changes, the vast changes in our society that we would have to get ready for? Excuse me, I'm getting over the flu. I don't know if the flu has hit you all, but I'm left with a little bit of a cold. Toffler predicted that we would have to move so quickly in order to understand and get ready for a true technological revolution. Now, I've had a love-hate relationship with this revolution, and I don't know how you feel about it, but I would feel that you're pretty exhausted from it too. But without technology, my work would not have been discovered by this marvelous group that you're all part of. My research wouldn't have been discovered, and I wouldn't have the great honor and privilege of sharing with you today. But the other part of technology is that one of the main reasons for burnout, and we'll discuss this more, is that people aren't connected. There's always that technological something between us that gets in the way of connecting. We are wired 24/7. I don't know if your phone rings often. My phone doesn't ring often any longer. Everybody reaches me through a technological system or device. And I don't know if you get snail mail, but my snail mail is much less frequent. It used to be that you got a letter and you could think before you responded to it. And that thinking and resting and deciding how to respond was healthy and good for us all. Well, we don't have that anymore because, as you well know, people want to be responded to immediately, and often we don't have the time to really think or process what the best response is. People today have an 8-second attention span. That is less than a goldfish. And if you've noticed, even movies that we want to watch to relax with, they go so quickly. The films go so quickly. I don't know if you have Downton Abbey, which is really a rather sophisticated soap. If any of you watch it, um, I loved to relax with Downton Abbey, but it went so fast, for instance, that I couldn't assess how Lady Mary's love life should progress because we were on to the next scene. And this fast pace is making all of us feel, oh my goodness, how do I catch up? With Herbert Freudenberger in 1970, we were introduced to micro burnout. And Freudenberger was an excellent psychologist from Germany, and he coined the term burnout. And basically, Freudenberger said that burnout was an overload emotionally and physically that was work related and that people just stopped because they couldn't handle their work, they couldn't think any longer. And the stages of burnout are depicted as a withdrawal from conversation, a feeling that you don't want to take care of yourself any longer, a feeling that all of your accomplishments mean nothing. Finally, then one can become paranoid and one can self medicate with either drugs or alcohol until, without an intervention, one falls through the cracks. The three psychological components that bring on burnout are compassion fatigue. Think of a glass of water, and when the glass is empty, one feels one still must give, and there's nothing inside any longer to give. Um, Compassion fatigue is part of the next two primary psychological reasons for burnout: vicarious trauma, that is, that one experiences with one's clients what precisely the client is going through so that it impacts on you as much as it impacts on a client. And then there's countertransference, which is a psychological term that really has to do with what your patient, what your client, what the child you're working with or the child's family touches in you that is either positive and makes you feel very warmly toward the child and family or is negative. And all three of these major factors for burnout have a macro level too. Today, it isn't just what we see in our practice, it's what we see all around: the horrors, the injustices, the cruelties. the war, the shootings, it feels like it is happening to us, even if it's not. And it feels like if it's not happening to us, we aren't safe. And in any second, this could endanger us and everyone we care about. Violence, destruction, cruelty, without any kind of a limit. Freudenberger spoke about burnout as far as being work induced. I wonder if you think it's only work induced. I wonder if you think that perhaps it's more complicated than that, because research, of course, shows that it is. Burnout is a perpetual cycle which involves one's personal life, one's professional life, one's physical life, one's health, and one's relationships, all of one's social relationships, from friendship to your most intimate companions. I do want to, I alluded to this earlier, early in my work, for a reason that I didn't understand, working with abused children. Our profession is really impossible because we see things that we can't talk about with most people. You've seen them. I've seen them. I've seen children burned for masturbating, their genitalia burned. I've seen children used as human ashtrays. I've seen starved children where their bellies are as large as mine during my third or fourth month of pregnancy. I've seen hungry children, battered children. And you can't talk about this to most people because they're not, you don't, they're not, they wouldn't understand it, and they'd be so overwhelmed. Like, how was your work today? Well, all right. And if you have a few people you can discuss this with, you're lucky. And what happened to me is I broke out early in my work in this field, which I love and need to do and swore I would return to. I broke out in blisters all over my body. And I thought it was the work. But really, what it was things in me from my early childhood and from my marriage at the time were being touched by the work I was doing. And so I had to take a real look at myself and my past and make some changes. Divorce was necessary in order to go back to the work I think I was always meant to do. And it's important to know that this ongoing link exists between the personal, the professional, the social, and the physical. And when we get into self care strategies, we'll be able to get into address that more. I think it's important also for you to talk about with me, and I'm hoping this is more of a conversation between us than a lecture, about the differences between burnout and depression. The they present in very much the same way. People just feel so negative and hopeless. But burnout, through appropriate self care strategies, can be eradicated and prevented, addressed and prevented. We're going to go into the self care strategies, but you know most of them. And the heart of what I want to talk to you about today is the neglected self in self care, because the care has been researched very carefully. What has been ignored is the self, the individual, unique self that each of us have, that certain strategies will really, really speak to us and help us and uplift us, and certain strategies just won't. And certain strategies that your best friend, your parents, people very close to you say are right for you may not be right for you. And uh, we need to address and discuss how to find the strategies that are right for you. Well, depression is caused by, usually, is usually caused by the loss or betrayal or connivance within a relationship. Or there is a cloud that one does not understand and there's no answer for that just makes you feel you don't want to move any further. Burnout, on the other hand, is caused by overload that is touching parts of you that you must respond to in order to alleviate the burnout. The strategies that we will talk about in self care, if you find the right ones, absolutely remove and prevent burnout. Depression is harder to treat often, and there are many schools of thought. They're all valuable, and you need to find the right one for you. I'm going to give you a very fast case example of someone who suffered from both burnout and depression. We'll call her Josephine. Josephine's younger sister had polio as a child, and Josephine was raised to always care for her sister. And Josephine had to leave a job as a teacher that she loved so much because her sister was never taught that, yes, you've had polio, yes, you limp a little, but you can have a full life and you are not perpetually ill because you once had polio. But Josephine didn't understand this about her sister. She gave to her sister. She was burned out, and then because she was very angry that this burden was on her, she became depressed. When I worked with Josephine, we were able to look at how she was overwhelmed by the responsibility, and she had to help her sister to know that she was really well and needed to begin her own life. Uh, it worked because Josephine understood what was necessary so that she could have a fruitful life. What I'm really pointing to is that insight into yourself and what you need and who you are is the wisest way to approach and eliminate burnout. But here are some some categories that are important to go over before we dwell on every essential, unique self. Because the road from compassion fatigue to compassion satisfaction is self care. In personal self care, there's counseling, there's therapy, there's journaling, there's loving music and art, there's religious and spiritual approaches, gratitude, mindfulness, yoga, a labyrinth, and you know the difference between a labyrinth and a maze. The maze stops you and makes you feel, oh my goodness, which way should I go? It's meant to confuse you. But a labyrinth, you walk and just relax and think, and you are present in the moment in a mindful way, and it is very, very self soothing. And of course, the other thing in one's personal life is time to relax, time to be, time to have fun in a way that's fun for you. A professional setting that avoids burnout, of course, involves safety, diversity in work, excellent supervision, conferences, and being the ambassador of what you know and enjoying this because we all in this field have so much that we know that's appropriate that we can use outside of the field. I know that I've been a consultant to theater groups. There's a new movie that will be coming out this year, the documentary award-winning documentarian Jennifer Fox's first feature film about sexual abuse of young children, which stars Ellen Burstyn and Laura Dern, will soon be distributed through HBO. And I was able to use what we all know as a consultant to that film. So being a professional ambassador of what you know is very important. And then physical self. You know we need sleep, you know we need sick leave, vacation time, we need the time, the permission, and the place, even though we may be tired, to care for ourselves. We need connection, we need sexual expression, and we need to listen to our bodies. When I say this to you, I don't mean don't go to a doctor or a health professional if you need it, but we must listen to our bodies, for instance, and observe our bodies. The blisters told me that I was burning up about something. I was being drained about something that I would have to address. If you've seen a doctor and you're all right, if your neck is hurting you for no physical reason, who's being a pain in the neck and how can you address that? If your back is hurting, what is breaking your back and what should you do about that? If you're having trouble swallowing, what are you being asked to swallow in your life that you don't want to swallow? If you're itching for no physical reason, what are you itching for? If your stomach is hurting you terribly, what can't you stomach? Um, and if you don't have the answers to that, I urge you to find a professional person whom you can talk with about that. There's so many schools of thought in psychotherapy, and any licensed professional, especially one whose work you know of through someone you trust, can be helpful to you. The most important part of picking the professional is, do you feel that investment of time with this person can really be beneficial to you? It is the relationship that matters. And when we look at our social selves, I love the work of Dr. Jeffrey Greif, who's a social worker at the University of Maryland. And he talks about the importance of relationships that are mutually fulfilling, where self respect and mutual respect are key. Greif talks about the must friends, the friends who you just must talk to about the important things in your life. The trust friends, this is a larger group, but it's a group you really trust to share with well. And then there are the just friends, the people you just have a good time with. The rust friends, the people who you share a background with so you can say, what was my sister wearing at this occasion? Or do you remember what my mother or my best friend Eileen said about this or that? And to that category, I add the dust friends. This isn't Dr. Greif, this is I speaking. The people by default or design who drain you so that you must let go of as one sees dust just leaving. Because the cost of these relationships just is so great. Uh, we know that we need sleep. We know that we need rest. We know we must take care of our bodies. We understand what we must do for self care. We know we need vacations. We know we should have sick time. Why aren't more people taking good care of themselves? How can we then appreciate how we go from overload to satisfaction? The self in the self-care strategies is what is being neglected. And I turn to the work of Dr. Otto Roth to try to explain this for you. I want to tell you that usually what I'm talking about with you today for less than an hour is either a 2 day experience where I am with you face to face and we can really go into depth about all the categories I'm talking about. Or if it's 1 day, it's 3 to 5 hours. So I'm touching the tip of the iceberg. But for you to understand the genius work of Otto Roth, who's not well known, we have to go back to Sigmund Freud's Viennese circle that was put together from 1912 to about 1914. And Otto Roth was the only non-physician in this group. He was a sociologist, and Freud really considered him to be a son. You know about Freud's emphasis on the Oedipal conflict, and it's true that his insights into the complicated psychosexual dynamics in a family can teach us a lot. And what I've learned about unconscious defense mechanisms is essential and in my work. And that all comes from Sigmund Freud. But in 1924, Otto Roth gave us something that was extremely important. And his book was called The Trauma of Birth. And the trauma of birth basically sets forth a theory that in order to be whole and enjoy life, we must think of ourselves not as uncaring about our family, but as an individual within a family context. And that means that no matter how we love our family or how connected we feel in our love of our family, we must understand ourselves well. We must understand what we want, what we need, that may be very, very different from the people who we love deeply. And we must have the strength to claim that difference, which can be very, very hard and very complicated. In my work, I talk a great deal about an emotional sense of direction. The people who are not able to see themselves within a family context as whole and unique. And this is the part of us that artificial intelligence, even though it is amazing, overwhelming to see how it is taking over our society, as was predicted in Future Shock, the technology that would overwhelm us, that would make us just feel, oh my goodness, what is coming next? Tomorrow, today, the next hour. The unique presence of each self can never be replicated by artificial intelligence, just like no one will ever find a compassion gene or a sensitivity gene or a gene that offers love. This is, if you will, what poets describe much better than I can. If you will, each of our unique souls will never be replicated. And we must never, despite all that surrounds us, lose sight with our soul. And, in preparing for today, what I was thinking in stressing each self is that you and I know all we want and need to give to the children and families we're privileged to work with. And in this, really, we are one big circle. And understanding, as I alluded to earlier, how precious each life is what binds us to each other as a family in a world situation. And that uniqueness that we can touch in each child, and the hope that we can help each child to know, despite the suffering he or she knows, has seen, and will experience later in life, is a life force that endures. I want to talk with you about what I've learned that impedes this understanding of each individual unique self. It was really the research for my second book. And I do need and love to write. And as was said, I've been fortunate, I've been published many places, but I want to tell you that I could absolutely paper a large room with the rejection notes, letters, slips I've gotten when I've sent my papers to publishers and book ideas to publishers. So if you want to write, You write because you'll find a way to be published, and self-publishing today, as you know, has enormous opportunity. My second book, that all three of my books had to do with, I wanted information that I couldn't find anyplace else. So with my first book, it was how do you survive injustices and indignity? What is it that gets you through it? Why do some people fall through the cracks and others don't? My second book was, because the answer that I realized was love. Love is what gets us through it. Connection is what gets us through it. Children on iPads in a restaurant and at home constantly aren't understanding what love is. I understand how exhausted parents are when you finally can go out for a meal and have a glass of wine and relax. Um, but a child with an iPad in his or her own world is going to have a harder time finding that sustaining connection. My research showed that physical and sexual abuse, of course, always impedes growth and self-confidence and the capacity to love. But emotional abuse is always part of sexual and physical abuse. But in addition, it exists in a paradigm alone, and that there are dynamics within the family that impedes the development of the self. And uh, just briefly stated, rage, a child growing up with constant rage is going to have a very hard time differentiating and feeling whole within oneself. Obviously, you know, rejection, abandonment, that emotional onslaught impedes the development of the self. Enmeshment in a family where those raising the children say, you must think just as I think, or I withdraw my love. I go away physically or emotionally. I own you, I own your mind, or you will pay a price if you decide that I can't have that relationship with you. That's enmeshment. Severe neglect, where a child may be fed and the parent or caretakers may be there, but the child's whole emotional being is neglected. And then extreme overprotection and overindulgence, spoiling children, overindulging children cripples them because, as you know, we each have to learn to navigate the slippery slopes of life ourselves. We each need to be able to fall and somehow or other, despite so many obstacles, just get up and endure and keep moving. uh, with the development of the self that can be whole within the context of a family, or whole when you are alone without a family and somehow must survive, believing in yourself, believing you can find a chosen family, believing that you are deserving of life, that wholeness with people whom you select to be with allows one to have what I call, the phrase I've coined, an emotional sense of direction. You best know how to proceed, how to move on, what road to take in the complicated choices, what road to get off of when you know it's not going to work, who and how, who to build with, and how to navigate. And there are other insights and strategies that complement the self, allowing us to navigate fully and not be weighed down by burnout, that truly in today's world is in the wings for everyone, not just healthcare providers. One of the things that's moved me so much is that the book that drew me to you, which is such a privilege, is being bought by people not in our field. because the reasons for burnout, the devastation we see in the world, the suffering we see in the world, the idea that we can be next or somebody we love can be next, uh, is overwhelming to everybody. So here are some further insights that I think can help to address and prevent burnout. The understanding of the difference between sympathy and empathy in our life, our work life and our real life, because our real life isn't our work, we have to go home and we need the balance between our real life and our work life. And as important as our work is, we need it never to become our whole life. So if we sympathize with somebody, we are connected to them. We care so deeply. If we empathize with someone, there is a boundary. And with our clients and with some people, there must be that boundary. There can't be that constant connection. And certainly in our offices, as much as we care, we empathize. We don't sympathize because that is an ongoing connection. And we surely don't pity because that is condescending. Most people, developing this a little further, most people think that compassion and empathy are the same. They aren't. Empathy is that boundary, and professionally understanding that to work with someone effectively, we need them to know that they go home without us and face the world. As much as we care, they must navigate their world. Compassion combines with empathy. Compassion is everything we've learned professionally and all of our life experience that then combines with empathy, and that is our professional relationship. And along with that, we take life seriously. We take it seriously. But when things go wrong, it's wise not to beat yourself up, to be kind to yourself. Don't take it personally when you've done you're all with a client and things aren't all you hope. I know that the first time a client of mine who finally was able to have a fulfilling marriage died in a car accident with a drunk driver, I needed to have consult my psychiatrist again because I felt as if it had happened to me. And in truth, it did happen to a part of me because I loved her. And we love many of our clients, but that doesn't mean we are part of them. We're not. We are ourselves. Also, helping, we're almost out of time, but I'm going to go quickly. Understanding the difference between envy, jealousy, and hatred. Envy and jealousy come with mother's milk. Envy and jealousy are natural feelings. And with maturity, we can rise above them. And we can understand that healthy competition is competing with yourself, doing the best you can yourself. Hatred, however, children aren't born with hatred inside of them. Hatred comes to us when everything we stand for is impeded upon, when no one will hear our voices, when people refuse to understand us and demean us and cut off our opportunities personally, professionally, politically. That is what births hatred. We must be able to say no in order to protect our energy. We have to be kind to ourselves, and we must also think out of the box. If there's something you want to do, try to do it. If you want to write. If you want to advise in theater, knock on doors. Say, you're going to have different theater expressions that I know about as a therapist. I want to work with your actors. I can help. There's a wonderful play David Harrower's Blackbird, about sexual abuse of children, that I was a consultant for. And it was so meaningful to work with the actors and be able to tell them, without divulging confidence, of course, about the cases I had worked with, so that they could feel, as they said, they told me, and it was so marvelous, they said that you've given dimension to the words in the play, and that moved me so very much. We all have to have a dream. We must have a dream. And if one dream doesn't work out, it doesn't matter. We just find another. There's just something to do that complements our work or is outside of our work completely, something very different. If you want to take part in anything that excites you, that is superb self-care. And that will give you the energy, I promise, to do all the other good things that you know are necessary in your life, in your work, in every facet of your life. So I'm going to stop now. I'm going to have a few concluding comments, but I want to take your questions, and I want to look at the chat box to see what I've missed that I can perhaps address. So I'm going to ask now for my colleagues to take over and forward any of your questions, and I'm going to more carefully look at the chat box.
Thank you very much, Stephanie.
It was my privilege. It's my
privilege. This is Evgenia again, and I have a list of questions that I have collected during your talk. And the first one was asking you to explain what's the difference between feeling just tired and burnout. Because first, Lena says you can...
Between what and burnout?
Between feeling tired and burnout.
I'm so sorry. Being tired. I see. The difference between being tired and being burned out.
Yes, yes.
Yes. Well, it depends what's tiring you. Why aren't you getting the rest and sleep you need? And if you're unable to sleep, if you do sleep but you wake up tired, that is a first step of burnout. And perhaps your supervisor or consultant at work can help you with it, or perhaps you need to see a counselor or a therapist. Often being tired and has to do with not taking care of yourself or not feeling rested, even if you do all the right things. I hope that's a good enough answer. When you get to my last slide, you're going to see, all of you, how to reach me. So please get in touch with any questions. As I said, this is such a short time together. I wish I were in a room with you. I wish I could see your faces and respond to your body language. I don't see you, you see me. I wish I could look at you each. I wish we had, someday maybe our paths will cross, but please, if I don't answer something well enough, you must get in touch with me. I see here a very interesting question about Blackbird, about the play and the empathy for the victim rather than the perpetrator. Oh my goodness, we could spend 2 hours on burnout, about the burnout that can come from Blackbird. All right, with Blackbird, our 2 primary actors have been terribly abused and deprived, and they turn to each other for comfort. And it is sexual abuse, and a price is paid by both. And when the girl who is abused finds her abuser again, he is healthy enough to reject her. He lets her know that he did try to reach her, that he did try to get back to the hotel, and he couldn't. He was stopped. And that from prison, he wrote to her. He does give her that, but he tells her, you must move on beyond us. You must make a life. And I would love, if this, this is just the tip of the iceberg. I would, Who asked about Blackbird? Paul, if you want to talk about that more, email me, please. And I mean, don't email me because I get so many emails. Reach me at www.sarahksmullins.com and I will get right back to you. Other questions? You would like to know about the consequences of job burnout, a negative spillover in a personal life. Well, what we see, we can't make up. That's why our profession is called the hardest ever. We see the worst and the sickest of human nature. We see that so often people just don't care. And we see what this touches in us. So, if it's spilling over in your personal life, and it spills over in most personal lives, you need self care. You need relationships with people whom you trust. You need confidence, and maybe you need some therapy to see what is being touched in you that's limiting you in your personal life. I know that that's just the most superficial part of a response. Again, if I were in a room with you, usually what happens when I do a presentation is on the second day, I can meet with people personally that want more personal insight and guidance, and I can know more. But superficially, if it's spilling over, find out why. Also at work, you deserve to be safe. But the kind of work we do necessitates excellent supervision, the ability to go to conferences, to share with your colleagues. That's self-care. What we're doing today, I hope for you, what's provided by this wonderful protection hub, I hope for you that's self-care. I know working to set this up for me and learning how to do this and the patience of the two professionals helping me, that was self-care. So learning new things is self-care. Taking a risk is self-care. Don't worry. Don't worry. Don't worry. Oh, I hear noise in the background. Everything okay? All right. Don't worry if if you want to dance, dance. If you're a klutz, I'm a terrible klutz. I have 2 left feet. I like to dance. Dance. Have fun. If you like to sing, sing. I have a terrible voice. Really, I have a terrible voice. But I love to sing. And if we had time, I would sing a song with you about self-care where I make a complete fool of myself, but it can be fun, truly. So when we meet, I'll sing for you. Okay. Other questions?
Thank you, Sarah. I have another question. What would you recommend as prevention and response measures for the organizations that they make sure they take care of their staff, of their team?
Taking care of your team. I love that question. Taking care of your team, being there to talk with your team in confidence, in an arena of confidence about how they're feeling about some of the horrors we see. It's hard enough to see horrors between adults, but seeing horrors that are inflicted on children breaks your heart, even though you have to have, as I say, that boundary when you work with them and their families. So we must have a place in a work setting to talk with those we trust. We must have, in the best of worlds, a trusted, experienced supervisor and conferences to go to that uplift us and take us out of ourselves a bit. And if people are sick, tell them to stay home. Make sure they take their vacations. Make sure, as I say, when I was young, if you were sick, you were supposed to get to work. No matter what, you got to work. Well, that's ridiculous. And you make other people sick. And many of us, still have that mindset. We push and push and push ourselves. We can't. We must rest. We must be. We must find our inner souls. artificial intelligence is not going to find our unique selves. We have to claim our unique selves. That's the best self-care. Truly, the best self-care is knowing yourself and not being afraid to look within at what's impeding you and addressing it and being kind, because we all have regrets. We all make mistakes. We must be kind to ourselves. I hope that that's an answer. I wish I were with you personally to talk more about it.
Thank you. Thank you. A couple of more questions. So people were wondering if there are differences regarding the reasons for burnout of social workers in different countries. For example, US.
Oh, yet, I wish I could talk to you each in your language. I'm so humbled that you know English. Of course, there are differences in different countries. Of course, when war is there, it's different than in America now. I promised that I would be very careful politically. So, but um, the president that we have isn't the president most people voted for. And in Congress, we have elected officials who will not see the need for gun control. And many refuse to see that weapons for killing are different than rifles. Um, our challenges in America, the racism, uh, the brutality on our streets are very different than what one sees in countries you know so well that have been faced with constant war. But the main psychological causes, the trauma, the vicarious trauma, or the real induced trauma, the compassion fatigue, and the countertransference, which on a macro level is dealing with impossible people and impossible situations, regardless of the differences in our countries, those draining, horrible psychological experiences are universal. They're macro and they're micro. I hope that answers part of your question.
Thank you. Thank you. And the last question I have, do you know of any effective instruments or tools to...
There are. There are. And yes, there are. And if you write to me, I'll send you some references. But basically, if you're not taking care of yourself, if you're withdrawing from people, if you're sleeping but getting no rest, if you're starting to be paranoid, if you're drinking too much or you're using drugs, those are signs. If you're feeling like I don't want to be with people, they won't value me, and all the work that I've done means nothing, and I'm feeling like a zero rather than a human being, you're burning out. And please adopt the self-care. Do I have a couple seconds to wind up? Yes. I'm going to paraphrase. I'm not going to read these quotes to you because we don't have the time, but E.M. Forster talks about an aristocracy, not of the powerful, but an aristocracy of the caring and the compassionate who join hands despite the troubles of the world. And I hope I'm touching your hearts and holding your hands. And Martin Luther King says, I have a dream. Please, please pursue your dream. And the Greek philosopher Heraclitus, 535 BC, said, a man's conscience is his fate. The same, I think, is true of a country. I thank you so much for taking your very, very limited time and inviting me to be with you and having the opportunity to share with you. I can't see your faces, but I have a feeling for you through the Child Protective Hub, and I wish you all so very, very well. And I do hope that at some point our paths could cross in person. Thank you. Good afternoon.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Sarah Kay. We will have a couple of final polls right now. It was a wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. I personally enjoyed it, and I can see from comments in the chat box that people also enjoyed it very much. Thank you. We will have the recording published, so we can, those who missed it can, I'm sure, will go and listen to it. And yes, we will appreciate if you could answer a couple of polls that you can see on the left side of the screen right now. No, it's for participants. Yes, and thank you very much, and we will be closing the room in